When Nelson Mandela died, there was an interview on the BBC radio with the former American president Jimmy Carter, and he was asked by the presenter, a man named Justin Webb, if he thought that Nelson Mandela was in some way comparable to Jesus. President Carter dismissed it as a bit of a silly question, and he answered it with a definitive no. But to be honest, I think a lot of non-Christians think of Jesus in this kind of way. Not so much that Mandela is like Jesus, but more so that Jesus is like Nelson Mandela, or perhaps Mahatma Gandhi, or Martin Luther King Jr. I think they imagine that Jesus was something of a rebel or revolutionary, someone who upset the apple cart, who challenged the status quo and challenged authority, someone who championed the cause of the underclass, who was a crusader for justice, someone who was a great leader, someone who inspired and galvanized people into following them and their cause. I think a lot of people imagine that Jesus was like this, but they imagine that's all he was. But then you come to something like John 8 and verse 12, and you have to do away with that kind of thinking completely, because John 8:12, and there are numerous other passages in the New Testament like this one, but John 8:12 gives us a statement from Jesus that sets him apart from those men that I've mentioned and any other man who was ever born into the world. Jesus is standing in the temple in Jerusalem, and he's in front of a crowd of both friends and foes, and this is what he says: I am the light of the world. He that follows me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. And when you begin to examine that statement, when you really consider what it is he's saying there, you realize you have to put Jesus in a category all by himself. He is incomparable. There are three things that I really want us to look at in the next few minutes from John 8 and verse 12. Firstly, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. That's extraordinary. He never said he was the light of Jerusalem, which is where he was standing when he made this statement, right there in the Holy Temple, where pilgrims came from across the nation and beyond to worship God and offer sacrifices to him. Jerusalem was the city of the great king. It was where monarchs ruled over the land from their throne. It was the centerpiece and the heartbeat of the Hebrew civilization. It was their capital city, their chief city. It was the most important place in the world for anyone who was a Jew. And yet Jesus did not say, I am the light of Jerusalem. Nor did he say that he was the light of Bethlehem, that small hamlet to the south of Jerusalem where he was born, where centuries before prophets had prophesied that the Messiah would come out of Bethlehem, as it's written in Micah 5:2. But you, Bethlehem Ephratah, though you are the smallest of the clans of Judah, yet out from you shall come forth he who is to be ruler over my people Israel, whose goings forth are from of old, even from everlasting. A Messiah who was born, yet had no beginning, coming out from Bethlehem, yet existing before the creation of the world, in fact existing from everlasting, and only God is everlasting. And you remember the story of Jesus' birth, how he was wrapped in swaddling cloths and laid in a manger. And it says that there were shepherds in the fields nearby watching their flocks by night. And they had a visitation from angels who said, do not be afraid, for we bring you good news of great joy, which is for you and all people. Today, in the town of David, a Savior is born for you. He is Christ the Lord. And those angels sang to the glory of God. And the shepherds came and found the Christ child in the manger, just as it was told them. And sometime thereafter there came wise men, magi, from the east, bringing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, which they presented in worship and adoration before the newborn king. But Jesus never said he was the light of Bethlehem. Nor did he say he was the light of Nazareth, that village in the northern region of Galilee where he was raised from boyhood to manhood, where the scripture says he grew and increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man, where He was known as the carpenter's son, and all of his family was known. His mother, his brothers, his sisters, they were all known to the people there, where Jesus was an integral part of the community, joining in with the religious activity in Nazareth. As it says, as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day. Nazareth was that backwater nowhere place where others made fun of it and said, can anything good come from Nazareth? And yet Jesus was identified with Nazareth, so that wherever he traveled, he was known as Jesus of Nazareth. Yet despite this, he never called himself the light of Nazareth. And here's the thing that really gets me. He never even said, I am the light of Israel. Now, bear in mind, all of his ministry, all of his preaching, all of his teaching, his entire religious work took place in the nation of Israel. He traveled the length and the breadth of the country, but never left the country. He never got onto a ship and sailed overseas like those who came after him in his name, like the Apostle Paul. He never sailed to Asia Minor. He never traveled to Macedonia in Greece. He never went to Rome to bring his message to the people there and before Caesar in his household. Everything that Jesus did took place in the nation of Israel, so much so that even Jesus himself said in the New Testament Gospels, I am not sent but for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. His immediate mission was to the Jews. His primary focus was the Hebrew people. And yet on that day in Jerusalem, before that crowd, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Think about it, the whole planet, the entire earth, every continent, every country, every people group, every tribe and tongue and language. Jesus is the light of men and women, of young and old, of rich and poor, of the aristocrat and the pauper, the king and the beggar, of the academic and the scholar, the light also of the illiterate and the uneducated. The light of black people and white people, Asians and Arabs, the light of all India, the light of every part of Asia, every region in Europe, every country in Africa, every nation in South America, every part of North America, right across Canada, all 50 states of the USA, wherever a man can put his foot on the earth, Jesus there says, I am the light. And wherever you are watching this video right now, Jesus says about where you are right there, I am the light of that place. For he said, I'm the light of the whole world. And the second thing I want you to notice is that Jesus said, I am the light. He never said that his message was the light, not his teaching, not his conduct or his character or his example, not something that could be separated from him and somebody else somewhere else could imitate and copy and duplicate and therefore be the light as well. No, Jesus said, I am the light. So it's not simply that someone can speak the kinds of ways that Jesus spoke and is therefore the light, or just behave the way that Jesus behaved, treat people the way that Jesus treated people, and then that's the light of the world. No, Jesus said, I am the light. The light is him. It's the person, Jesus Christ. And he did not become the light. It's not that he somehow went through some spiritual evolution to attain to being the light of the world. He was, in and of himself, in his person, the light of the world. He didn't sit under a tree and meditate until he was enlightened. He never climbed a mountain and received visions until he was enlightened. But he was the light of the world that came into the world to give light to men. And the last thing that I want you to notice is that Jesus said, he who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. He who follows me, not he who joins a denomination or a church, not he who builds an organization or constructs an institution in my name, but he who follows me. Not he who follows a pope or a priest or a bishop or a pastor or a televangelist or a ministry, but he who follows me. And I think sometimes people go online or they open a newspaper or they turn on their TV and they see some story about some priest who has abused children or some pastor who has become embroiled in some scandal of immorality, some preacher who's fleeced his flock and stolen all the money. And people see that kind of thing and they judge that man and judge Christianity by that man's actions. They judge Jesus by that man's actions. And they say, well, there can't be anything to this Christianity thing because look how that man behaved. But they're looking in the wrong place and they're judging with the wrong judgment, because Jesus said, he who follows me. So it's not a matter of what a man looks like or how a man speaks, but it's whether or not he's following Jesus. So it doesn't matter what robes the man has on. It doesn't matter what collar he wears. It doesn't matter how flowery his speech is or how spiritual his language. It doesn't matter how big the Bible is that he carries or how much of it he can quote. The only thing that matters is whether the man is following Jesus. And if he's not following Jesus, no matter all those other things, he's still in darkness. And if his deeds are shown to be darkness, if his actions are exposed and shown to be darkness, then that's evidence that he was not following Jesus. Now, that doesn't mean that he is not and has never been a Christian, but it simply means in the doing of those dark deeds, he was not following Jesus. Jesus said there is only one way to come out of that darkness and walk in the light, and that is to follow him. You can't follow a dead man anywhere. He has no power to lead you anywhere. So if it really is the case that we come out of darkness and pass into light through following Jesus, and if he's saying that, and it applies to you and me and everyone else, then it must be that Jesus is alive. Jesus is the light of the world. Gandhi never talked like this. Nelson Mandela never said anything like it. Martin Luther King never uttered such a phrase in his life. But Jesus said, I'm the light of the world. Friend, if you are in the darkness right now, if you are in the mental and the moral and the spiritual darkness of sin, let me tell you that there is a way out. There is a way into the light, and it is to follow Jesus Christ. Follow him, for he is the light of the world. And in following him, you will come out of darkness and enter the very light of life itself. Because the light of life has a name, and it's Jesus Christ.